All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to another segment of Did You Know? I hope you're all having a great Friday. Today's topic is going to be on managing emotions and managing our reactions to certain emotions that might trigger us in a negative way, and making sure that we're able to, instead of react to emotions, respond in a constructive and productive way, so that we get the outcome that we want and we're better able to deal with these negative emotions. Now, sorry, my slides aren't forwarding. There we go. Talking about managing emotions involves, deciding when and how we're going to express how we're feeling after something happens that might trigger a emotion in us, whether it's a negative emotion or even a positive emotion. These are all part of the human condition. And it's really important that we're able to identify and express how we're feeling. And, like I said, because it's part of being human, it's totally okay to feel feelings. But it's also important to know how and when to express the feelings that we're feeling. And so usually when an emotionally upsetting situation happens, or something that makes us upset happens, we react. And so we have this quick emotional kind of response or reflex. And when it comes to a upsetting situation, usually we end up reacting in a negative way, and this can produce a negative outcome, depending on the situation. But more times than none, if we're reacting without really thinking about what we're going to say or do, it can usually kind of make the situation worse for us. But then what we do is we kind of hopefully step in and we take control of the situation, and instead of reacting, we decide to respond. Now, when we're responding, it's basically a more carefully thought out reaction. And so we are reacting to a negative feeling, a negative situation, but we're doing it in a way that properly addresses how we're feeling and properly deals with the situation without making it worse. And so the way we do this is by considering, okay, if I react this way, what's going to happen as a result? And if I react this way, what's going to happen as a result? And which result do I actually want to happen? And so when we react, this is usually what people say when they're saying you're being emotional. It is a quick, impulsive kind of reaction. Whereas when we're responding to a situation, this involves a higher level of what we call emotional intelligence, which I'll dive into in just a second. Now, our emotions are our body's natural way of making sense of the world and responding or reacting to different triggers. It's almost always impulsive. It's always like the first thing that our brain thinks up is react to the situation. But in cases where it's a negative kind of reaction, we have to step in if we find ourselves reacting in a negative way. Otherwise, we let these emotions kind of take control, and then these emotions push us to react in that negative way. And so it is difficult. I'm not saying it's easy to step in and say, okay, I'm upset, but I'm going to take control of the situation. But it becomes way more difficult once our emotions do take control. And so there's several things that we can do to help us keep our cool during these upsetting situations so that we can regain control of our emotions. The first one that I like is what we call centering. And this is when we take our attention away from whatever is happening on the outside and we focus it on ourselves, specifically on our being mindful of our body. And in the case of centering, the easiest thing that we can be mindful of is our breathing. It's this automatic process that we do without even thinking about it. But we can actually focus on the air that's going into our airways and into our lungs, and then focus on the air going back out. And what this does is shifts our attention away from whatever it is that's upsetting us. And so now we're not focused on that. We're focused on our breathing. We're focused on ourselves. What could make this easier is actually counting your breaths. Excuse me. And so inhaling for 5 seconds gives you enough time to get adequate oxygen into your lungs. And then we'll hold that for 5 seconds because our cells in our alveoli need to replace the carbon dioxide in our body with the oxygen from the air. And then we exhale for 5 seconds to expel all of that carbon dioxide. This does two things. One, we're centering our attention to our breathing. And two, we're giving our brain enough oxygen, enough resources to be able to deal with the situation in a more balanced way. Now, you might have to do this between 3 to 10 times to actually get a sense of relief. But this is going to take your attention away from your automatic reaction or impulsive reaction to the situation. And it's going to put your attention on your breathing. And once we're centered, we're better able to address how we're feeling and how we're going to go about responding to it. The next method is kind of the same. We're also shifting our attention away from the upsetting situation and onto our body. Instead of our breathing, we're focusing on our body. So whether it's taking a little walk or stretching or sitting down with our feet firmly on the ground and feeling the floor under our feet, playing with a fidget spinner or a tool that you can fidget with, or maybe even doodling, or counting your fingers, I find usually helps, because you're essentially trying to take your attention away from the thing that's upsetting you. And one thing that I like to do, it's a part of meditation as well, is closing your eyes, sitting comfortably, and just kind of feeling out how each part of your body is feeling, starting from your feet and working your way up all the way to your head. And so now you're not focusing on the upsetting situation, you're focusing on how your body is feeling. And this is essentially what anchoring is. Now, affirmations are important for our mental state when we're dealing with this situation, because we can only pound our breath for so long before we have to face the fact that, we just had a situation that upset us. And so something like a mantra or an affirmation, a phrase that you can come up with that's easy to remember, one that you can repeat to yourself to remind you to stay calm and stay centered. And I've shared some of the affirmations that I use when I'm dealing with a stressful or upsetting situation. A lot of times I'll tell myself everything's going to be okay, or even I'm okay with this. Now, in some cases I might not be okay with it, but telling myself I'm not okay with this, and if it's a situation I can't really control, it's not really helping me to say, I'm not okay with this. I'm just going to be resenting the fact that it's happening instead of feeling okay about it. Now, you've heard the phrase, fake it until you make it. And in this case, when you're telling yourself, I'm okay with this, everything's going to be okay, and you verbalize that, you start to believe it, and then you realize, I actually am okay with this, and everything is going to be okay. Another thing you can do if you're in an argument with somebody, or maybe you were talking to a friend and they seem dry or upset with you, reminding yourself, maybe this isn't about me, maybe they have something going on. And this kind of mantra kind of takes the attention away from what you're doing that's upsetting this person, and reminds you that they have their own stuff going on, they have their own life going on, and it's not that they're upset with you, it's that they have their own things going on. Reminding yourself even to focus on your breathing is one way. I have to be mindful, I have to center myself, I have to anchor myself, and so I got to focus on my breathing. And the last one, if it's a very difficult moment or very difficult time of your life, telling yourself that I'm going to get through this moment. It's just going to remind you that every moment that you experience, whether it's a negative or positive experience, it's going to pass. It's not going to be there forever, and you will get through it. And this is what's called affirming. And in the same way of centering and anchoring, you're taking your attention away from the situation and you're focusing on what you're telling yourself, so that you can have a clearer or more positive attitude over whatever situation is triggering these negative emotions for you. Now, a big part of emotional intelligence is being able to carefully choose how you're going to respond to a situation instead of letting your emotions influence your reactions. Now, it's important to identify and be aware of what emotions we're feeling, but there's a difference between identifying what we're feeling, identifying the emotion that we're feeling, and letting it kind of control us and letting it kind of take a toll on us. Because at the end of the day, as valid as our feelings are, they're just feelings and they can't really hurt us. But when we are aware of our emotions, aware of how we're feeling, we're better able to help ourselves avoid some situations where we might say or do something we'll regret. And a lot of times I see that people who react to a situation in an emotional or impulsive way will usually say something mean to the other person, or they'll say something that they don't really want to say, and that can end up taking a toll on your relationship with the person. Or they might react in a way that's self-destructive, or even in a way that causes more harm than good. And so it's important that we're able to carefully choose how to respond to a situation. And there's 3 parts to this. The first part of it is being aware of the emotion that we're feeling, being able to notice and identify what it is you're feeling, or even what other people are feeling based on their facial expressions and body language. Now, it's not absolutely necessary that you know how to do this, and especially with the age of social media, it's become a lot harder to be able to tell how somebody's feeling based on their facial expressions and body language, because we're so used to people posting a status about how they're feeling, and we're not very much used to identifying if somebody's upset based on their body language or their facial expressions, if they're wearing a frown or they seem angry. Now, in the case of what we're feeling, sometimes even if you're feeling upset, being able to name or identify that you're feeling upset is going to help you feel more in charge of this emotion. You put a label on it, and so now you can kind of take it and put it in its own compartment, if you will. The next step to this is understanding, why do I feel this way? And in order to do that, we have to be compassionate towards ourselves. We have to be understanding towards ourselves, because we're human, and at the end of the day, we're going to feel a whole range of emotions, and that's totally okay. And so let's say your friends are playing sports and they don't invite you to play sports for whatever reason. You might feel triggered, you might feel upset by that. And so understanding your emotions is being able to identify that, I feel left out, I feel ignored because my friends didn't invite me to play sports. And then the compassion part of it, the understanding part of it, is not going, I shouldn't feel upset about this, but rather telling yourself, it's normal to be upset about this. It's okay to feel left out if my friends didn't include me in their plans. And so once we better understand this emotion, we can move on to the third step, which is accepting our emotion. So once we notice it, we notice how we're feeling, we identify how we're feeling, and we understand why it is we're feeling this way. Hopefully we're not blaming ourselves or others, or we're not judging ourselves or the other person for whatever it is that we're feeling. Then we're better able to kind of deal with it, because it doesn't help us to blame the other person for how we feel, and it's not going to help us if we're judging our emotions and telling ourselves, I shouldn't feel this way, or I'm weak for feeling this way. There's nothing weak about it. And once you're able to accept these emotions, maybe that'll give you some clarity to go, okay, let me just talk to my friends and see why they didn't invite me to play sports with them. And so instead of going, you guys never invite me to play sports, the conversation is now, hey, I noticed you guys didn't invite me to play sports. What's up with that? And so now you'll get a response. You'll get some idea of why you weren't invited to play sports. Whereas if you were to just pout and be upset about it, you're not really gonna know why they didn't invite you to play sports. Maybe it just slipped their mind, or maybe they thought you wouldn't enjoy the sport that they were playing. And it could just be a misunderstanding. And so a lot of times our emotional reaction is, these people are against us, or the world is against us. It's because our brain is trying to protect us from being hurt. But when you make yourself aware of your emotion and you understand why you're feeling it, you start to notice that it's really just a feeling, and it could be based on truth, or it could not be based on truth. But you won't find out if you're reacting. Whereas if you respond in an appropriate way, and maybe you ask some questions, or you try to figure out why you're feeling that way, you'll get an answer to it. And a lot of times it's not even what you expect. we can't really control our emotional or we can't control our emotions, but we can learn to manage them, and we can learn to accept them. And so imagine you're trying out for the basketball team with your friends. All your friends make the team, but coach tells you, hey, you're not cut out for basketball, maybe you should draw or something. Now this is probably going to upset you, maybe even make you feel insecure. So identify this. I feel upset. I feel insecure because I didn't make the basketball team. I thought I was good. And so now you're identifying how this is making you feel. And so you have an option. How are you going to react, or how are you going to respond to how you're feeling? The first one that we all immediately resort to, and I'm guilty of this myself, is to look upset and look angry around your friends. And then just hope that they'll ask you what's wrong. Now, 8 times out of 10 probably won't work out in your favor. And then you'll just end up being more upset, like, why aren't they asking me what's wrong? And so this doesn't really help at the, ultimately it's not going to help the situation. And neither is this gossiping about your friends to another friend and saying something like, oh, I didn't even want to be on the stupid team. I mean, you know that you wanted to be on the team. So essentially you're lying to yourself. Whereas if you confide in that friend and you say something like, I feel bad for not making the team. Everybody else made it, but I didn't. But you know what? It's cool. I can still play basketball with my friends outside of school. And perhaps the more I play, the better I'll get. And then I can try out for the team again. So now you're giving yourself an option. You're giving yourself kind of a way to correct how you're feeling, or to address how you're feeling. And then if the sadness, maybe you feel upset or insecure still, just remind yourself that everything's going to be okay and this feeling is going to pass. Just like every other feeling, it's not going to stick around forever. It's going to pass. Give it some time. Don't let it break you down. Don't let it cause you to react, because that's not going to help the situation. And so how would you react? You want to consider each option that you have. Once you've done the centering and the anchoring and you've calmed yourself down, you want to consider your options, and you want to think about which reaction or which response is going to lead to the best outcome for you and for the other person, or for your friends. In some cases, you can use the props decision-making model to do this. And so first you'll pause and kind of take a step back, calm yourself down, and then you'll reflect on how you're feeling. Identify the emotion that you're feeling. You can go through your options, or go through the kind of different ways that you can address this feeling. Prioritize that understanding and that acceptance of, I'm human and it's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel insecure. And then once you've got all this down, you want to choose the response, not the reaction, but the response that's going to maintain peace for you and for the other person. Now, usually what I find when it comes to confrontation and confronting somebody for something that they did, there's some times where it's good to say something, and there's some situations where it's probably not best to say something. And so I got this kind of from an article way back, like a long time ago, and I can't really remember what article it is, but it essentially tells you to ask yourself 3 questions whenever somebody does something that upsets you, and maybe you want to confront them about it. The first question you want to ask yourself is, does this need to be said? Do I actually have to say something to this person? Like, do they need to know that what they're doing is upsetting me? Now, if your answer is no, not really, then kind of, accept it and move on. And you have the power to do that once you acknowledge, I'm upset that this person did this, but I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. You kind of take control of that emotion. The next question you want to ask yourself, if your answer to the first question is yes, is, does this need to be said by me? Do I have to be the one to go up to this person and say, hey, look, you're kind of doing this thing that's upsetting me or upsetting people around you? Now, if the answer to this question is yes, you move on to the third question, which is, does this need to be said by me right now? And so, is this the right time and place for me to confront this person? It's not always the right time and place. Sometimes you might need to step away from the social gathering you're with, or maybe wait until you're with that person alone and not surrounded by people, in order to confront them about how you're feeling and to have that conversation. And so whatever response you choose is going to influence what happens next, including how the other person is going to respond to you. And ultimately, you want a positive response. You want whatever problem, whatever feeling you're going through to be worked out. And in order to do that, you can't really be yelling at the person or accusing them of upsetting you. You have to kind of approach them in a conversational, calm, and peaceful manner. This all takes practice. It's just kind of a process, learning how to respond to situations in an appropriate way, and kind of overcoming our reactive response to be negative or impulsive. But the more you practice it, the more you practice that mindfulness, the centering techniques, the anchoring, and the more you tell yourself these positive affirmations, the healthier, more balanced your impulsive reaction is going to become. And then the better your outcomes will be. And so over time, it does get easier, but it's going to take that initial effort from you to acknowledge what you're feeling, to say it's okay to feel this way, and then to choose how to respond appropriately. So thank you all so much for tuning in. That is all I have for you today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you next Friday. Take care.